Welcome, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to our NJPAC's virtual Business Partners Roundtable, and that is the Art Center's virtual conversation series featuring discussion with business leaders, political leaders, thought leaders, sometimes all three at one, from New Jersey and beyond. My name is John Schreiber. I'm the CEO of the Art Center, and I welcome you on this really lovely cool fall day. As you know, pre-pandemic, NJPAC held these events on our campus. And over the past 19 months, our roundtables have evolved into one of our most popular digital series. And I'm really glad that you have decided to Zoom in and join us. Our hope going forward, as God willing, the pandemic heads for the exits as time goes by, is that we will gather in person again. And when we do, I will be in a jacket and tie, I promise. I want to thank our Business Partners Committee Chair, Joel Sherman of Atlantic Tomorrow's office, for his steady and imaginative help on booking this series. And I thank all of our friends at PNC Bank, who have for so many seasons been the sponsors of the roundtable gatherings. Today, I'm excited that we will have a whole 45 minutes to talk with one very special guest and somebody that I have great admiration for, and that's Scott ONeil. Until just very recently, Scott was the Chief Executive Officer of Harris Blitzer Sports and Entertainment. And in that job, he oversaw both the Philadelphia 76ers, the New Jersey Devils, and our own Prudential Center here in Newark. This summer, however, he made the decision to leave that position. And just around the same time, he published his first book, Be Where Your Feet Are, 7 Principles to Keep You Present, Grounded, and Thriving. And that was published by St. Martin's Essentials. Scott was educated at Villanova and the Harvard Business School, and he was previously the president of Madison Square Garden Sports, where he managed properties including the New York Knicks and the New York Rangers. He also spent 7 years as the senior vice president of the NBA's renowned team marketing and business operations group. Earlier in his career, he served as president of hoopstv.com, and prior to that held positions with the Philadelphia Eagles and the New Jersey Nets. So just to remind everybody of our timing this morning, this is a 45-minute session, about a half an hour of Q&A with Scott and me, followed by 15 minutes of questions from you. If you'd like to ask Scott a question, you can do so at any time by typing it into the Q&A box. You can find the Q&A box when you hover your cursor at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Scott ONeil from an undisclosed location. It's really nice to see you. Where are you this morning?
Good morning, my friend. I'm in Salt Lake City, Utah, at my wonderful in-laws house, Dee and Janet Reynolds.
Great.
I'm thrilled to be here today. I missed you. I missed you in person, but we spent some time over the COVID hiatus together.
We did.
Doing some live. But I have great admiration for you. I love the purpose of NJPAC. I love your vision. I appreciate your ability to bring an entire community together to support the arts. I know how critically important the arts are to keeping this society growing and thriving, and you're the best of the best. So thanks for having me.
Well, you're very kind. So I want to ask you a question actually that I don't think we discussed in advance of this morning to start off, and that is, after the murder of George Floyd, you, I believe, really led an initiative where Harris Blitzer made a multi-million-dollar commitment to advancing social justice, equity, diversity, inclusion. If you would, and I know that's at the moment for you, it's not part of your present, that work at Harris Blitzer, but tell me what inspired you to do that and how you understood the importance of that work.
Sure. That's a wonderful question, and I appreciate it. We, first off, just was very humbled to work with one of the most diverse sports and entertainment teams in all of the world. And so diversity and inclusion was something that we started, 8 years ago when I began the quest, when it was just this Philadelphia 76ers. And we quickly put a rule in place that half of all the final candidates had to be non-white and non-male. So for us, that began a journey of just appreciating diversity. We happen to have had, I don't know, do I speak in the present or the past? It's so confusing. Harris Blitzer, has the good fortune of working in Camden, New Jersey, Philadelphia, Newark, and Wilmington. And those are our 4 communities that I have a great admiration, respect, and love for. There are also 4 communities that need a lift from time to time. And I think that's the role that sports and entertainment plays. We are this beacon of hope, and we have this opportunity to change and hopefully drive change. We have the opportunity to create conversations that others have difficulty creating. And so, our initiatives, while announced, we put some new programs in place for sure. We officially hired a chief diversity and inclusion officer, David Gould, who is a force for good and a force for change. And you will be hearing his name for decades to come. He's a true talent. We instituted a Buy Black program where we, in Newark and in Philadelphia, we found five small businesses that were owned by African Americans, and we put our muscle behind them. We gave them presence at our games, social media presence, PR help, some finance help, and in hopes that we could do our small part to help these small businesses thrive. And we're going to do 5 new ones each year in each city, which is pretty awesome. Then we did an audit of our spending, and that was no bueno, as we say in the office. We did not do a great job at the time of diversity spending, and so we did an audit, and then we set a target, and then we're off. And so we're in the process. I'm sure they're still continuing in the process of doing a better job with our vendor spending. I think everybody can do a better job, but the intention and awareness is the key, and then a program and process and benchmarks which we put in place. And then we made a commitment, a financial commitment, which is wonderful, $20 million commitment, and that's in the process of being invested in the community. It was a tough time in the world. It was a tough time in this country, and the leaders of this country have to do better and be better, and because we're a sports team, and not because we're better than anybody or different or special, but because we're a sports team, we get a lot of attention, and we have a choice to either use that attention for good and for change or not. And we chose, at least when I was there, we chose every day to use that to the best of our ability to drive change in the world. And I just want to, a little caveat is I grew up with very little means. I was a food stamp kid when I was little. So there's a soft spot in my heart for trying to help people. And I will tell you, I grew up in a diverse neighborhood, but I didn't really understand. So I guess what I would advocate for, if you're listening, is to learn more, learn about zoning and Jim Crow laws, and learn about housing restrictions. Look at California's housing restrictions and where Black people could and could not live. You almost can't believe what was happening in this country, and learn about criminal justice reform, learn about the criminal justice laws, learn about the discrimination that has existed in this country forever. And you'll be disappointed and disgusted. And you'll be, and as I was disappointed in myself that I just didn't know more. I heard it. It's not like I didn't know intellectually, but I didn't feel it. I didn't actually know the back and forth. I'd never heard of the Tulsa Massacre. I mean, there's some things that I had to educate myself on. I think a lot of us do. And so the good news is the information's out there, and you can, if you want a good book, read White Fragility.
Yeah.
If you want a good case, there's a Harvard Business School case on institutional racism. It'll blow your mind. So there's plenty of resources out there, and I just assume educate yourself. And when you educate yourself, you have two choices. You can ostrich it, and put your head in the stand and not move, or you can move to action and go to make a difference. And I hope you choose the latter.
Yeah, really great advice. And I'm reminded of what Tip O'Neill, the old House Majority Leader in the Reagan era, said famously, that all politics is local, right? So we have, each of us, an opportunity, to your point, to get educated about these kind of life and death issues, about equity and inclusion and diversity and fairness, and we can make change in our neighborhoods, in our communities, in the towns that we live in. And the work that you all are doing and that we try to do, it does that, right? Change happens where we, to your point, be where your feet are, right?
Yes.
So anyway, to that point, so you left this, huge job, and you've had a couple of huge jobs in these amazing sports and entertainment brands. And folks are wondering, since you left, and you haven't started a new business, you haven't taken over the LA Clippers yet, or anything like that. So people say, what's he up to? So what have you been up to since you have left us here in Newark?
Yeah, well, when I left on June 30th of this year, and then took off 3 days later to go to Mozambique with my daughter Kira, who's just turned 18, and 20 other teenagers through this group called Humanitarian XP, and we went to go build a school. And so I found myself for 3 weeks in the third poorest country in the world, with somewhat meager conditions, in homes with no running water and no electricity, on a work site with a foreman who didn't speak English, and I don't speak a lick of Portuguese. We did have one young lady who spoke Portuguese, thank goodness. And it was humbling. And the area where we were building the school, there's 97% unemployment. 97% unemployment. Can you even imagine?
That's extraordinary.
Yeah, and just having the experience of shepherding 20 teenagers across a third world border, and in the midst of COVID, and everyone's struggling in this country. Like this, what I've experienced with teenagers, and with companies. I've been speaking. I've been doing quite a bit of speaking, from Google to tech companies to sports entertainment companies. And there's a mental health epidemic going on in this country. I didn't experience that in Mozambique, interestingly enough, which I'm trying to explore. I experienced happiness there, and hope. It was really, really beautiful, to be honest with you. I also got perspective on physical things. If you could think of the toughest area you've walked through in any city in America, that would be like the Four Seasons compared to what we were dealing with. And I think, driving up to my house when I was back, I almost had a "are you kidding me" type experience. It was like, this is, it's not fair, it's not right. And it's not that I'm not grateful for what I have. I am, and I'm grateful to. I tell you what, with all the strife in this country, I'll put it this way: this is still the greatest country in the world. It is, and we have people from all over the world, and we fight the fight, and we have a voice to voice our displeasure, which I like, and we have a will to drive to be better. But I had a great appreciation for the United States. I was thankful to be back. I do miss the people of Mozambique. I miss their hope in their eyes, their smiles on their faces, and their will to improve and learn and grow. But man, oh man, what an incredible perspective changing trip. And to see my daughter over there, I have 3 daughters, and they all have different unique skills. But the one thing that they are, and they represent this new generation, they're just global citizens. I had a daughter serve in a Syrian refugee camp in Athens. I had a daughter serve in Zambia with orphans living on the floor of a tent, and you just think like, we're in good hands. Like, this next generation, they get it. They see each other as people. They love each other. They're connected. They understand their brands, they understand our brands. They work hard. They're global. They're not burdened by what we're burdened by. And so to be over there with 20 incredible teenagers for 3 weeks and be able to talk to them about their hopes and their dreams and their fears and their anxieties, and so it's incredible trip.
Okay. So what a wonderful next step, right? And what a total 180, I imagine, from what you were used to, leading a business that is worth $1 billion, to go to an underdeveloped country and $3 billion business. Is that right?
Well, yeah, it's a good business.
Okay, right. So that's a sea change. Anyway, that's
Sure
obviously something you will never forget, and clearly it changed your life. And you also were able to change the life of a bunch of young people for the better, right? And maybe for the rest of their lives. So anyway, so you wrote the book, Be Where Your Feet Are. You wrote it during the pandemic, right? So give us a sense of the experience of living through a global health crisis and how that inspired you to write this book.
Well, first off, everyone on this call should go get vaccinated. And if you're not, wear a freaking mask and stop the mask.
Yeah.
Okay. There's not a political statement by not getting vaccinated. The only statement you're making is that you're putting your own well-being and those around you at risk. So I have, I know how hard the pandemic was for so many people who lost loved ones, who had loved ones get sick, and others who risked their lives as healthcare workers, even delivery men. Everybody kind of pitched in and said, okay, I'm all in to keep this country afloat. And I'm grateful and thankful and humbled by that. For me, it was the first time I'd actually been home in 25 years, and I don't want to just look past that. Like I didn't know what a family dinner was, to be honest with you. John, much like you, I'm at night, I'm working.
You're working.
Like
Yeah.
what I do for a living, so, between the 150, 180 events we have at the Prudential Center and the 50 or so we had in Philly, that's a lot of nights.
Yeah.
It doesn't include the nights you're traveling and hustling and out for dinners and trying to do your thing. And so that to me, that was the biggest like screech of the tires is it allowed me to be home, to have more meaningful conversations with my daughters and my wife. Mm-hmm. I said to my wife halfway through, I said, you're really interesting. And she said, you've got to be kidding me. And I said, no, it's a compliment. She said, I know, we've been married 25 years. I'm glad you're finding out. I was like, no, that's not what I mean. You're amazing. And you're just really interesting. And she is. I mean, she's well-read and intellectually curious, but probably not my best delivery, if you will. Yeah. But we found joy in the simplicity of life. And I think that's something. Were all your kids
home with you?
They were all home. Uh-huh. So that part was incredible. And then, I wrote the book. I started writing it right before the pandemic. My best friend had taken his own life. And that was pretty hard. I spiraled into some pretty nasty grief and was wrestling with my own mortality and how the world's supposed to work and what's fair and what's not fair. And so that's when I began to write to heal. And then the pandemic started and it gave me a whole new fresh perspective on how to, let's put it this way. I didn't write a book to write a book. I wrote a book to heal. And a good friend of mine said to me, he read a couple of things and he said, Scott, what if this can help one person? He said, why wouldn't you publish this? I'm like, because it's personal. It's like all my failures. Like this book is not a victory lap tour. This book is literally a more of a compilation of when I tripped and fell down and I got fired, or I ran a company into the ground, or, I had some problems at home, or struggled as we struggle in life. And he said, I know, but no CEOs are talking about it. No CEOs are vulnerable enough to do it. And you can do it. Like you're confident enough to do it. Just do it. And that his name is Randall Wright. And that pushed me over the edge. And then I went for it. You want to talk about humbling? Try publishing a book when you're not a writer. Holy moly. So that was a humbling experience as well. But
talk to us for a minute about the writer's process. How did you do it?
Yeah. Well, there's a way to do it, and then there's the way I did it. they're two different things, unfortunately. So the way you should do it is you write a book proposal. It's pretty simple. There's a formula. You can pull it up online, and you write one chapter, and you write it, you write an outline for the book, and then you write who the target audience is and your bio and how you're going to sell it, etc. And then you submit it either to an agent or directly to a publisher.
Right.
I wrote a whole book, and
So you gave yourself an advance. In other words,
but it's a disadvantage because you're not, you write one chapter, you put your best into that chapter, and then let them dream and hope, and the best publishers and editors and agents will help you shape it from there. And so I had a whirlwind, but anyway, it ended up perfect. Tim Bartlett ended up buying the book at St. Martin's, and he's an amazing friend and coach. And Jan Miller is my agent in Texas, who discovered Stephen Covey, ironically enough. It's amazing.
Okay.
And so they were both really helpful. I ended up hiring a writer, and Jan said, she's like, look, you're a book, your story's a book. This isn't a book. You need a writer. Right. Which was, so fair. Michelle Becker.
A lot of people do that. Yeah.
Yeah. I just was after the fact. So she's literally taking 350 pages and condensing it. It's kind of funny. But she had,
talk to me for a minute about failure, right? Just about the bravery that it takes to discuss failures, right? I mean, those of us who are lucky enough to lead organizations, failure is really in the background. We don't turn the volume up on our failures, right? We are intentional about what it takes to succeed, and yet you did something I think that is unprecedented. You wrote a whole book that was very visceral about the aspects of your life as a man, as a business leader, where success was not in the equation, right?
They say success.
I don't know that I could have done that or would do that, right? Because it puts me in a vulnerable place, right? You allowed yourself to be in a vulnerable place. How did that happen?
Well, one is my wife said to me the other day, she said, well, you'll never have to worry about an expose. Everything is out there.
Right.
So it was pretty funny. That was her reaction. As I said, I intended the book, the book was written as my own personal journal, to be honest with you. So it became a book, and it's helpful, and there are exercises, and it's now a book that's practical and you can use, but my intention was to heal from my grief. And so, I was reading, what's the name of the book? The Ride of a Lifetime by Bob Iger. It's a wonderful book.
Is it?
And in the book, it is. And in the book, he writes, this is a few snippets where he writes about where he struggled. And one time he was having a nervous breakdown because he was worried he wasn't going to be the CEO of Disney. And he writes about, I had a nervous breakdown and I freaked out in my car. I had to go see a therapist. And I was like, good for him. I ended up meeting him about a month after I wrote the book in the bubble in Orlando that the NBA had set up. And my book had not been published yet. And I just said, hey, I just want to tell you, that's the best part of the book. And as I reflect back, it's because that's where we learn. We don't really learn at the victories. It's that expression, success has many fathers and failure is an orphan. I'm not sure that's right. It's like every time something's gone right, some percentage is luck, and some percentage of it has to go, to other people in some way, especially in our business. And we don't really reflect back and say, okay, what could we have done differently? What could we have done better? If something fails, we actually pick it apart, or I do. I say, okay, are there, what did I contribute to this failure? Are there 3 decisions I could have made differently to change the trajectory of what happened? And then what did I learn, and how can I grow from it? And I think failure is our best teacher. It really is. And if we can put it out on the table, and if this vulnerable look helps other people look in the mirror and say hey, I'm okay. This guy got fired. This guy ran a company into the ground. This guy has problems with his kids. Sometimes this guy struggles at home. This guy had an issue with his friend. This guy's friend killed himself. He's stricken by grief. Maybe one of those stories touch you. He had a faith journey, so maybe one of those stories touches a reader here or there. And I will tell you, on LinkedIn, because you can always get me on LinkedIn or Twitter, and the stories I've gotten on LinkedIn about people reading a book, it's brings me to tears. It's pretty cool. I never had, you'll appreciate this, John. I always laugh because I manage talent, but I'm not talent. You know what I mean? And so like you manage talent for a living. That's what I always did. And so to be in that talent bucket is pretty humbling. It's vulnerable because, you know, you go on these review sites and there are some wonderful reviews and there are some not so wonderful reviews. And I always used to say to talent, like, why do you even read that stuff? Why do you listen? You need to focus on what, you know, and I go right to the trap, like right into that rabbit hole. It's kind of funny, you know, and you know, you just, you know, life is, anyway, so go back to your core question. Life is a series of experiences. If you told me when I was 22, I'd read all the stuff. Hey, if you want to be a CEO, I knew I wanted to be a CEO at 22. And they said, hey, you're going to fail, or you're going to get fired, or you're going to do it. And I was like, nope, not me. I'm going straight to the top.
Right.
And by the way, first off, the analogy is all wrong. There is no top. Like anywhere you get, you know, it's just a whole mountain range out there for us to explore.
Absolutely.
You know, and all the learning happens on the way up.
Yep.
It's not, there is no destination. You know, this is a journey. Like this is not this, it's this, you know.
That's right. That is exactly right.
Series of opportunities.
Success is a corn maze, right? That we are stuck in, right? You know, if we
we have all the things and like success, you know, people say success. If you think about when you were 22, you think like, what did success mean? Success means a lot. It means very differently to me at 51 than it did at 22. To me, you know, I have success in my, you know, my family. It's probably most important. You know, my faith journey. You know, my friends, the community. Can I make a difference in the community? There's some like modicum of, I don't know, whatever perceived success is at work, but it's just a piece of the pie and not a very big one. And you know, I don't know if you felt that, but that's something for me.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, as I look at my journey over, you know, so many years, the failures that I've had, the challenges I've had, the sort of business disasters that I've lived through, you know, all of that only has made me, you know, more intentional about moving forward. And I don't talk about my failures a lot, but they're there and they're always in my head. And sometimes I pull them up as a reference point when I'm talking to colleagues or about different work-life situations. Without failure, we don't have any context. We don't have anything to talk about, you know, because to your point, nobody has a straight line to success. And anyone who says they do, they're not telling you the truth, right? So you're right.
It'd be fun. It'd be fun though, you know, it just doesn't exist.
That's right. That's right. It'd be like 10 days at Canyon Ranch. You know, that's good. You know, that's a straight line to success. You know, eat right and exercise, and then go back to life. Anyway, so I encourage our friends out in the house to go to the chat and ask questions, or go to, and we'll get to questions in just a minute. But I just have a few more for you before we go to our pals in the audience. So you've had this sort of remarkable career over 30 years, running these remarkable sports and entertainment franchises. How can your experiences in the C-suite offer guidance and insight for people who are in the early days of their careers, or who are in the middle ranks of large companies? Sometimes those of us who are in places like that in our professional lives don't feel empowered. What's your advice? Sure.
Well, again, it depends on what you want to be when you grow up, you know, no matter how old you are. You know, I'm trying to figure that out now, and what you weight differently. I would just say what I've learned is, one is just make sure you're working for someone and with someone who is rooting for you and who wants the best for you and is willing to help you learn, grow, and develop and advance. Because that, if you want to, if that's an important thing for you, you know, the people that you're working for matter most. They're going to shepherd your career or not. And I was fortunate enough to work for David Stern, one of the greatest, you know, people in business.
Amazing person, right?
Yeah. Adam Silver.
Tell everybody for a minute about David Stern. I knew him a tiny bit, but you know him well.
Yeah.
He was a great mentor, right? A great leader.
Yeah, he's probably the greatest leader. I mean, other than Adam Silver, who will go down as the greatest commissioner of sports, I think David had that handle for quite some time. he took a small struggling business and made it the global game of the NBA. He was a visionary beyond compare. He saw the world differently. He woke up every day convinced he didn't know anything. His parents owned a little deli in New York, and he had a big chip on his shoulder. And so he read and learned. You get on a plane with this guy, and he would have a stack of papers and articles, 12 inches deep. And he would just reading about sports or business. He'd be reading about geopolitical stuff and life sciences. And he also had this vision and that sports could be a vehicle to change the world. And so when Magic Johnson contracted HIV, like he wasn't like on his heels. He'd already spoken to the best experts and doctors in the world. He already had a perspective. He understood the impact that magic could have on the world and to change the narrative on HIV forever, and did. And so you think about like the impact that this guy's had on life in the world. He's since passed away, sadly. But he was a friend and a mentor till the last day. I will tell you, he was the toughest, meanest man I've ever met. And I loved him. I would run through a wall for him. Okay, but he was tough, and he got after it pretty hard. But what I loved about him the most was if anything ever happened to me, and I had some things with my wife and I with some medical stuff we had to deal with, he was the first person. I don't even know how he found out. He was the first person to call and help. If I was ever struggling, he was the first person to my side. I mean, he had a love, but he was tough as nails. But we'll go down as one of the greats of all time. But I worked for Adam Silver. I worked for Len Komorowski, who's now CEO of the Cavaliers. I worked for Joe Banner, who became president of the Eagles. I worked for Seth Berger, who ran and won the sneaker founder of and one. So I just had this, whether it was dumb luck or not, I worked for some of the most incredible people in the world. And and what a gift. What a freaking gift that I got to learn from them.
Sometimes these really strong leaders teach us what to do, and sometimes they teach us what not to do, right?
Yes.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I used the commissioner, David Stern. I had a lot of time with him. I traveled with him quite a bit, especially in my early years there. I did a bunch of advanced work, which if you don't know what that is, that's like, you're essentially like the gopher setup man. Like you make sure that the cars are there, the plane's there, the hotel's there, the whole path. I did a lot of that stuff for him when he was, when I was first at the NBA, and everybody was so afraid of him. They would run to the back of the planes, and I would sit right across from him because I'm like, this is literally like a chance to learn from, the greats. And he over time told me that he believed in two core principles: that micromanagement was underrated, and then he edited it later on, a couple years later, to episodic micromanagement. And then he believed that he could get the most out of people through fear and intimidation. And I almost
wait a minute. Say that one more time.
That he could get the most out of people through fear and intimidation.
Really? Okay.
And so I would see him yelling at someone and then look at me and give a wink, and I'm like, this is unbelievable. And so once you knew it was a game, it became easier to deal with. But his core philosophies are very different. I just, what I learned is that style is style is style is style is style. It's like if you ever played for a coach growing up and playing a sport and they'd be screaming at you, just look for the message.
Right.
And you as a leader, you meaning all of us here, it's like you have to figure out what your authentic self is and what your authentic style is. Because it's, because you'll figure out what works for you, but you can't try to be him, and you can't try to be you, John, or me, or, but once you find your authentic self and then build people around you that complement your style, that's when you start to build a team that I think has some oomph. But I learned so much. Seth Berger is another one who I ended up working with at HBSC as well. He ran our innovation lab, and he taught me, like, he always knows the three things that are the biggest thing, what's most important, WMI, the three things that matter most. He knows exactly what they are, and that's where he spends all his time. He doesn't waste his time on stuff. For me, I was always like, hey, let me look at this. Hey, look at this shiny object. Hey, I think you should do this. And he's like, no, it's these three things. And if you take some time and figure, I have this coach, Spencer Holt, who's my executive coach, and he says that high performers spend 65% of their time on the three things that are most important. And think about that. So he's like, hey, at the end of each week, you just order your calendar. You write down the three things. And you just say, like, okay, am I using my calendar the right way to do these three things? 65% of my time. The first time I did it, I was at 23%. He's like, you need to get better.
Mm,
23%.
right.
And so I had to learn the magic word of no. I had to be more disciplined in how I managed my calendar, and I became more effective because of him, through him,
All
through
right.
his process.
So tell us, we're going to go to questions next. Last question. What's the definition of be where your feet are? Explain that.
In the simplest, it's phone down and head up. It's deciding to be wholly present wherever you are.
Right.
It is about creating moments and memories and not focusing as much on balance, but focusing on the time we have together and making them matter.
Good. Okay. Thank you. My colleague Chelsea has questions. Chelsea, all yours.
Thanks so much, Scott. So our first question comes from Joel Sherbin, who says, "Hi, Scott. Couldn't be more proud to call you my friend. We need you to help lead this country to a better place. Are you considering a run for public office? We need you."
Joel, first off, I miss you, my brother. Hope you're good. And certainly appreciate the support of this event. It matters. You're a good man and a good friend. No, my wife and I, when we got married, neither of us could rub two nickels together. So we had a different kind of prenup. And one of the things that she asked me for was never to run for political office. But I appreciate that. I think I would love it. But it is messy and ugly. So if there's any of you out there that are running, give me a call. I'm happy to support you. I think the world needs better and better people. The problem is it's getting worse and worse. And so the attractiveness continues to plummet. So the likelihood of getting talented, wonderful people to run for office keeps going down, because what you have to do and what you have to give of yourself and sacrifice of your family and be dragged through the mud on stuff that doesn't matter doesn't seem to be worth it for a lot of my friends. So I'm encouraging, but I'm on the same page you are. My friends who are talented and gifted, I'm pushing them aggressively because we need real leaders in that space.
Given where we are right now in our country, in terms of our, I would say, a discourse that is discordant, do you have a prognosis for our future?
You know, I once heard, I was at this conference in New York, 75 CEOs, and Biden came in and spoke.
Yes.
And this is not.
When was this?
Boy, this was probably this was right after Hillary was running, so it was during the race. Okay, so he did not. So and he was sharp at that point. You know, he's a little older now, but he was sharp, and he gave a speech that sent chills up my spine, and it was a pro-America speech, and he essentially said, "Hey, do you remember in the 80s, who were you afraid of?" And someone said, "Hey, you know, the Japanese, they were going to take over the world." And he's like, "Yeah." And then somebody said Russia. He's like, "Yep." And now it's China. He's like, and his view, which I subscribe to, is that this will always be the greatest country in the world. It will. Like we are, and it's because we've mixed our DNA, and because we've come here in different ways for different reasons. I know my grandfather. I just heard this at a family reunion recently, and on my mom's side, the Italian side. And my great grandfather came here. His whole lineage were farmers and never had a nickel. He was a farmer. He was 19 years old, and he had a pig. That's all he had. And he sold the pig. That was enough to give him $13 in his pocket and passage here in the bottom of a ship. Couldn't read or write Italian and couldn't speak English. And so he shows up with $13 and a dream. That's like, and that's America. Like, that's who we're filled with. Immigrants who have the courage to dream and the kind of the will to succeed. And I think that and we've all intermarried, so that the mix of our DNA is as strong in the world. So I think our foundation is really strong. I think we are gifted in that we have a country where we have the right to disagree. And I think that's wonderful. I've been disgusted by the way, it's probably the wrong word, or maybe it's the right word, disgusted by the way that the facts are distorted, and
yeah, me too.
Disappointed by us curating our own media so much so that you don't have any sense of balance or reality, and upset that we've stopped listening, and all we do is shout. And I think the world, or I think this country can get better. We have to find humility and humanity, and more humility, more humanity I still have a strong core belief that will be the greatest country in the world for a really long time.
Good. I feel better. Thank you.
Good.
You know, we had a debate. We had the first governor's debate at NJPAC the other night, and here are two candidates who clearly have really starkly different positions on several significant issues, right? And yet, within that hour, they had a civil dialogue.
That's great.
At the end of the conversation, it was clear that even though there was obvious severe disagreement between them, they respected each other. And more of that, I think, would serve us and would serve our country well. So here's hoping that
Let's hope that's a model for the rest of the world.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
Yeah. Chelsea, what do we got?
So our next question comes from Ryan Gates at PNC. He says, Scott, I have a lot of respect for your career. Thank you for your time today and truly opening up. I want to add a little levity. I have heard that you oversee a baseball event called Obatz. Are you able to share any details about that event?
I can. I'm very interested to see how you know about Obatz. So I have three brothers, Sean, Michael, and Matthew. I'm the second born, but most loved. And every year we rent out a minor league baseball park and invite 50 friends, and we play baseball tournaments. Pitch your own team baseball, so it's effectively softball-ish. It's quite fun. We have an award ceremony, we have a draft, uniforms, some people that help us for cover in the locker rooms. It's an incredible event that's filled with as many laughs as you could possibly have in a weekend. There's a golf tournament as well. And by the end, most of us are aching and limping into our cars to get home. But it's one of the great escapes I've had in the world.
Wow. Where? I mean, I imagine this is a by invitation only event.
We'd love to have you. We'd love to have.
Where does it occur? We
move it around to different parks. We've been up, New Hampshire, upstate New York. We've been in Annapolis. We've been out at Penn State. I've been up in the Poconos. It's been fantastic. It's a great little.
Oh, it sounds like fun. Chelsea, I think I have time for one or two more.
Sure. And Ryan Gates said, Jeff Brown, he and I go back for 20 years. And he says hi.
Oh, that's great. Tell him I said hello, please.
So you talked a little bit about, advice for emerging leaders, but I have a specific question. What advice would you have for a young person who recently graduated from college who's looking to work specifically in the sports industry?
Well, I would get into sales because you'll be hired in 8 seconds. I think the sports world's probably about 8 to 10 years behind the rest of the world. So they haven't made the full shift into direct-to-consumer marketing. So there's still an opportunity to get your foot in the door and learn how to sell, learn how to cold call, learn how to develop relationships and grow. And so that's what I would advise people any young person who's young and graduate to do. Second thing I'd say is you'd be surprised how many people who know somebody who can help you. And so I would make sure I'd be casting a wide net, and what you'd be asking for is an introduction to somebody in the business. And with that introduction, it's on you. I remember my wife, who was in the sports business for years before she retired, she interviewed at the NBA in the consumer products group, and her follow-up was a basketball that she signed. It was a licensed basketball. And her follow-up note said, working for you will make this basketball and this autograph worth something someday. And I always think about that story. It's like, it's so creative. Like, I don't have those creative genes, but if you're interviewing, like, what does your follow-up look like? What does that package look like that you send? Are you just emailing a note? Are you emailing a resume? Like, what are you doing to stand out and be different? Because if you're willing to go to the lengths to go to the store, buy a basketball, sign it, package it up, send it with a cute note, like, as an employer, as a hirer, I'm thinking like, okay, well, what length will she go to when she has this job? I know she's creative. I know she'll go the extra mile. And so it's like, be different, be unique, be yourself, and try to network to people who will get you an opportunity.
Great. So last question for you. because I know that you are as diligent a parent as you are, a business leader, right? And my experience has been similar to yours. I missed a lot of family dinners, and I regret that. Importantly, your kids know you love them. My kids know I love them.
Right.
That's a fundamental thing that is present. But missing family time is a reality, for some of us who are in business. So, how do we prepare our kids to succeed, to thrive in a world that is in constant flux?
Yeah, that's certainly a loaded question. What I'm doing with my children, I go 21, 18, 14. So they're still in that mold phase. I'm out here. My daughter goes to school out here, so I've been spending quite a bit of time with her. And I've had those challenges where, my daughters have said, Dad, it's too much pressure, like being a daughter of me, or I'm not you, all that kind of stuff. And I don't put that out. I will tell you, like, I put out just, you have to find your authentic self, and you have to find your window, and I will help you. And, and when the kids get older, it's hard. You're not the dad anymore. You're a coach. And I'm just sharing experiences. Because I have 3 daughters, they can do whatever they want when they hit 18. And so I'm just coaching them now. And I just say, hey, here's a shared experience. Here's where I can help you, and all I can do at this point is share experiences, offer my love and support, and occasionally make an introduction to them. And they have to really kind of go and find it. They're all different. I don't know if you found this about your kids, but I've got 3 kids. They're all unique. I don't know where they came from. They're all wonderful in their own rights. By the way, they all struggle in their own right in different ways.
Yeah.
They all have like an incredible love of family, which I really appreciate, which I know comes from my wife. They all have this incredible love of community. They want to change the world, which I love. They're global citizens. They're cool kids. But I think they're defining success differently. I think they're defining it very much like the Gen Zs of the world do. And I'm hopeful. Like I love this generation. I do. They're global citizens. They see the world differently than we did. They're not burdened by the luggage that we carry around, about all the crap we have.
Yeah.
And they have access to all this information, and they like to debate, and we mix it up in our house. And I have a whole political spectrum in my house, and they mix it up. And I just, I'm rooting for them. I'm rooting for them, and I'm rooting for their friends. And I'm hopeful. But as a dad, being a dad's hard. I will tell you, it's the most rewarding work in the world, and it's the most challenging work in the world, and it's something that I truly cherish.
Great. I'm reminded of I'm reading a biography of Queen Victoria now, and she's a very powerful monarch, in the 19th century, but it's a constitutional monarchy, right, in England. So she didn't really have any power. What she had the power to do is advise and to warn and to collaborate with, and she used that in really smart ways. I think as parents, we're all kind of like Queen Victoria. When our kids get to a certain age, it's up to them to choose to listen or not, to ask or not, and the more we impose, the less they're inclined to take our advice, I think.
That's right.
It's like. So it's a balance, right? Anyway, thank you. It's really fun to talk to you, and it's always fun and instructive at the same time. This is a great book. I encourage everybody out there to buy this book on Amazon. It's called Be Where Your Feet Are, and it is by our friend Scott ONeil. Thank you, sir. Be well.
Keep changing the world.
We are really excited for what's next for you, and I hope when you make those calls, you will call us back and let us know. Okay.
Stay tuned.
Okay. All right.
See you, thanks, guys.
Thank you, sir. Thank you all for joining us today. And I hope you'll also be able to join us for one of several business-oriented virtual conversations on NJPAC's calendar in the coming month. On Wednesday, October 13th at 7 p.m., we will host our next conversation with Cooperman, featuring Master of Finance Lee Cooperman in discussion with his guest, Larry Summers, who was the 71st Treasury Secretary of the United States. And Larry Summers is one of the most interesting people in the world. And Lee is a master interviewer as well. So tune in for that. Then on Thursday, October 21 at 7 p.m., we'll have what promises to be a really interesting discussion with three former New Jersey governors, Tom Kean, Christy Todd Whitman, and John Corzine. And they will talk about the state of the state in advance of the upcoming gubernatorial election. That event hasn't even been formally announced yet. You are the first to know. You'll hear about it in your inbox. And on Tuesday, October 26th at 9 a.m., we'll host our next Business Partners Roundtable with a trio of remarkable executives. Charles Lowry, Chairman and CEO of Prudential Financial, Tim Ryan, U.S. Chair and Senior Partner of PwC US, and Debbie Dyson, President of ADP National Account Services. They will talk to us about their organization's work in advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion, both internally and in their communities. These are going to be interesting sessions, and I know I will learn a lot from them, and I hope you will too. So keep an eye on your email for invites to all of these events. Until then, stay well, stay safe, and see you next time. Bye-bye.